both sides of the conversation family. We welcome you to this virtual space crafted especially for you. My name is Jada Curry, and I'm both sides of the conversation's marketing director and graphics design specialist. I want to take some time to ground us all as a community into this space we are about to open up in, so let's go through our community standards. Both sides of the conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation, so we ask that you all be respectful of that. We also ask that you be respectful of each panelist, host, and participant. We do encourage healthy debates and conversations. Don't personalize anything with anyone. This includes name-calling, bullying, trolling, or shaming. This will not be allowed or tolerated. Your perspective is yours. It is not a prescription. You do not have to agree, but show respect. These community standards apply to all of our live shows and any virtual spaces that we hold on social media, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We want to make sure that we are caring for each other as a community. This is our priority in all of our endeavors as both sides of the conversation. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's show and continue to stay in touch with us via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or all of them. All right, thank you for listening and see you soon.
Welcome everybody to both sides of the conversation. I'm John Henry, Executive Director. Today is Thursday, so you know what that means. We're going to have another educational presentation, and today we have a phenomenal guest, Dr. Nora from the Roots Clinic, is going to come on and answer questions, talk about COVID and some of the questions that community have. And I know there's some burning questions about COVID, especially as our young folks. The Pfizer has been approved to go into our to give to our young folks. So I know there's going to be a lot of community questions regarding the COVID vaccination and as well as COVID in general. So looking forward to having tonight's Educational Thursday. And we're looking forward to the community's questions. And Dr. Noah will be able to answer a number of questions. So community, get ready, wrapped up. For all of our folks watching on YouTube, use the live chat function, and we'll get your questions on the screen for Dr. Noah to answer any of those questions. With that being said, just want to say, one, I want to give a huge shout out to Dr. Silas and her team today, as we had a phenomenal Dreamkeeper in our Mega Black meeting today at Booker T. Washington. Phenomenal event that they put together for community, and just blessed to be a part of it. A lot of networking going on, but a lot of just community just reflecting on what's going on as we approach the holiday season. So just want to give them a huge shout out for the work that they're doing. Also, just want to talk about a couple of things before we get into our announcement. There's been an increase of community violence across the Bay Area in our communities. I'm not sure if everybody's been paying attention, but there's been a number of shootings. Also today, there was a 28-year-old mother who was killed coming into the Bay Bridge, coming into the city. Lucky the young kids that were in the car wasn't injured, or her fiance wasn't injured, but the young mother, 28 years old, was killed. And there's just been a number of killings and shootings in Oakland, San Francisco, across the Bay Area over these last couple of weeks. And, as community, we just have to continue to do our part to work together. And to the folks out there, I know tensions are high in the community. I know the stress levels and anxiety is high. I know financially people are being impacted in many different ways. But this gun violence in our community, we have to do something about. And for these people, whether it's road rage or whether it's targeted situations in these cars, man, we lost a toddler on 880 a couple of weeks ago. People are just being real reckless out there, and we have to be careful, man. People are just shooting in cars, shooting at people, and it's really impacting the community. Very frustrating stuff to have to report. But it's happening. I know we had a rapper who was killed yesterday. Just a number of violence is just happening in our community intake, and I don't know if it's just the holiday season, COVID, people stressed, things are happening. But as community folks, as we continue to push these resources to the community, again, I'm always going to advocate for our mental health. We got to get these mental health services in our community, especially for our young people and some of the folks in the community, because again, that is a lot of it. We got a crisis across the city with this drug addiction that's happening in our cities. It's a lot going on. So, we're tasked to deal with a lot as community folks, but we got to get these resources to the community so that we can help prevent some of the stuff that's taking place in our community. But it is always tragic when we have to announce these type of violent situations that just impact our community in so many ways. So prayers out to that family and to the other families this week. There's a couple of folks in San Francisco, Oakland that were killed. And I just want to give those families our condolences. As we approach the holiday season, it's just been a stressful time, and there's so many things. And to have one of your loved ones taken away just puts a even increased burden on families. Also, want to continue to reach out to community, as you all have been seeing. For whatever reason, there's been an increase of domestic violence cases publicly, as well as happening in our community. Terrible stuff happening in our community right now. And, just want to make sure that community folks are reaching out, our organizations, making sure that we're reaching out to our family members, checking on your folks, and making sure that our loved ones are okay. It's so much going on. But for whatever reason, it just seems to be an increase of domestic violence in our community. Also, terrible news. We had some young folks who did some despicable crimes of assaulting some of our Asian community brothers and sisters on the train in the East Coast. And, we got to have a conversation about that. This is our young folks in the community. We have to do some real education and talk about some of this hatred stuff that is happening in our communities, and really get the right messaging and really keep working to figure out how do we bring our communities together. Because we can't be oppressing other communities, as we are always fighting not to be oppressed, and we can't be the ones perpetrating those acts. And I know there's small amounts of those acts happening around, but they are still happening, and we have to do something about it. As well as we've been having a continual increase of robberies happening in our community at the malls. And I know as we start approaching Black Friday, community, be safe out there, especially to the ladies of the community. We know most of the time our ladies of the community are the ones going to the malls. In Emeryville, there's been an increase. Stanford Mall, it's just been an increase of robberies. So community, be safe out there this holiday season. As time has went back an hour, it's getting darker. Be aware of your surroundings. Try not to be texting, listening to earbuds and things of that nature. Are you trying to get in and out of your car? Because, unfortunately, these things are happening in our community, and we would hate to see more community folks being victims of these crimes, especially with the car break-ins. Numbers of those been happening. So while you're out this holiday season, please make sure you remove your belongings, and make sure as you're leaving stuff in the car, just be careful. It's been a lot of break-ins and things of that nature. So enough of that news. We want to go ahead and just move on into our announcement, but I just wanted to get that out to the community. Very touching stuff that's happening. Also, some of the announcements that's going on, some of the things that's taking place across the country. Great news. The brother Julius Jones' death row sentence was changed. So now he's getting life without parole right before his execution. The Oklahoma Parole Board granted him that life without parole. So just hopefully, with that time frame, there was a lot of questionable things in the case. And I know they've been reviewing it, but nice to see that the brother wasn't executed. And maybe there'll be some time to revisit this and maybe get some greater news for it. But right now, that Oklahoma governor did get that statement out, and the brother did not get executed. So just happy to get that information to the community. Also, the judge and today released or gave them exonerated the two men that was convicted of killing Malcolm X. So I know that's been going around the news lines as well. So the two brothers that was arrested for the assassination of Malcolm X were released. So more information to come out. And it's just, things are happening within the justice system. We got the Ahmaud Arbery case. Things are not looking so good. The young Wisconsin man who shot and killed some people. So we still got some work to do, community, when we talk about social justice, racial justice in this country. When we talk about racial bias, we still got a lot of work. We are not there, and we're going to continue to do our part here at both sides of the conversation to continue to have these racial comments, some of these workplace conversations, because we are noticing more and more information is coming out about our larger employers across this country are still dealing with racial issues within the workplace. I was just reading today, Stanford right here in Palo Alto got some terrible reviews from their staff and employees about the racial issues within that university. I know a number of other universities and large organizations are doing climate assessments of what's going on, and the reports and the information that's coming back with our workers are dealing with in the workplace. I know there's a big strike at Kaiser with wages. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in the labor market that as community, we're going to have to continue to have conversations to our employers out there. We're going to still reach out to them and to the HR departments and start really having real conversations. How do we move this racial justice, this equity that we always talk about for our folks in the workplace, because we still have problems in this country, and it's going to take us all to work together and have these conversations to fix it. With that being said, our both sides of the conversation announcements. You know, we are approaching Giving Tuesday and the holidays. You could use the Amazon Smile on all your purchases to help give back charitable donations to both sides of the conversation and to any nonprofit out there as we get close to Giving Tuesday. At the end of the year, it's a big time when community organizations and folks give back to community organizations. So if you would like to support us, as we are always looking for support to move our platform forward and to continue to do the work that we're doing in the community to impact our community, we are looking forward to that. The HRC and the SF Rebels and the Sheriff Department is having a book fair this Saturday from 11 to 3 p.m. It's going to be at the Greatway High School parking lot on O'Farrell and Pierce in San Francisco. They're going to be giving out books. Our Human Rights Commission director is going to be there. I believe the mayor is going to be coming by to make sure that we continue to push education in our community. It's a phenomenal event. They're going to be doing basketball, and the Junior NBA League is going on. Great stuff. Brother Nate, that co-host with us on Tuesday, he'll be out there with his team and his folks to make sure that the community gets those books and connect with some of the programming that they have going on. The San Francisco SF Black Wall Street are proud to announce that they are launching their Black Millionaire Development Program. They will be providing technical support, network opportunities, and grant resources to support and create pathways of wealth and ownership for Black entrepreneurs. So more information is going to be coming out. I know they are very focused on the TAY population, the 18 to 30, and then the seniors 55 plus, making sure that they get equity and get opportunity for ownership and for business and small entrepreneurs. So we're looking forward to support them. And as we get more information from them for folks how to get connected, we've already put out some flyers on our social media handles to connect with community, but we'll get that information as more start coming out. With that being said, East Oakland Collective and both sides of the conversation, we are partnering up with other partners for the Feed the Hood 19 Thanksgiving edition pop-up care village. Y'all saw this Tuesday. We had Sister Candace and Sabrina come on and talk about some of the stuff they're going to be doing with Heal the Hood. And, it's going to be a great event. I'll be out there. We'll be passing out food to the community. We got the community ambassadors, and we are excited about that. And that will be happening this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The majority of the work will be happening at the East Oakland Collective office at 7800 MacArthur Boulevard. We'll be out there again, and we are still looking for volunteers to come out and support that event. They're going to need people with vehicles to help get this food and move it out to our encampments and help support some of our unhoused brothers and sisters. So looking forward for that. If you would like to volunteer, please go out to the East Oakland Collective website and sign up as a volunteer if you have some time this weekend to help support. Also, we're doing the East Oakland Collective, both sides of the conversation, supply and toy drive drop-off. This holiday season, as you all know, the weather is dropping here in the Bay Area. It's getting cold. We are looking for some supplies to help our unhoused folks, blankets, coats, and toys for our young folks. As you all know, inflation is going up in the community. The cost to live, it is going out of the roof. The cost to shop and do the normal things that we do are really eating up the discretionary funds, the cost of gas. So these type of events really impact some of our single families and some of our folks who are financially struggling during this holiday season. So please, if you want to make a donation, drop off a coat, please send it to East Oakland Collective, and we'll be making sure that we get that stuff out to the community. I know a number of stuff have already been rolling in, and we're just ready to start loading this stuff up throughout this holiday season, start getting it to our families who are in need, especially our elders when we talk about the food security issues. These donations and stuff are very, very important as our families are challenged to go to the grocery store and get the necessary things that they need because of this cost. We know our elders in the community are on fixed income sometimes, and when we have these type of increases, it really impacts those families, especially our families who are, single family parents. They need this support, so we want to get out there and support them this holiday season as well. Also on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, we will be out there with the San Francisco African American Arts and Cultural District, and our supervisor, Shaman Walton, will be out there. We'll be doing about 200 turkeys for community. We're going to be getting that information out, but we'll be out there this Wednesday from 12 to 3 p.m. and we'll be passing out 200 plus turkeys to community. We'll be out there at Sam Jordan Way, but I'll be getting more information out to the community. Also tomorrow, one of our sponsors, Collective Impact, they'll be giving out turkeys over there at 1050 McAllister Street. I'll be by there tomorrow evening as well as we start pumping out these turkeys for the community. And believe me, the cost of a turkey has went up. We are seeing prices from anywhere from $75 to $100. So, this is a big increase in cost. And we want to make sure that we are supporting the community. So thank you to those organizations. And I know there are a number of organizations that are doing food drives and turkey drives and making sure our community has support. And as we start getting that information in, hopefully before our Sunday conversation, we'll get that information out to community. So just wanted to put that out there. Also, our show's coming up this Thursday, next Thursday, we'll be having another educational presentation. We got a special guest coming on to talk about self-reflection. Miss Brandy Sheffield is pretty good presentation. So we'll be having her come on next Thursday. And then this Sunday, we'll be having part 2 of our relationship conversation. It's going to be a blast. We got so much feedback from relationship part 1. The amount of emails and texts, community asking for a part 2. We heard you, and we will be having part 2 this Sunday. So it's going to be an explosive conversation. We have some phenomenal guests. We'll be getting the flyers out after this presentation. We have some folks from the East Coast, the South, the West Coast. We're going to be talking about relationships, y'all. We gotta fix them in our community, but it's going to be a powerful, powerful conversation. And then next Tuesday, we will continue our Hidden Gem segment where we will continue to highlight our Black and brown businesses, as well as those community leaders that are doing positive things to positively impact our communities. With that being said, that is it for our announcements. I'm going to close my mouth now and get us on to our presentation tonight. We're going to bring up Dr. Noah, and she's going to introduce herself to the community and talk about some of the things that they're doing. And then we'll jump into the question and answer session about COVID and some of the other questions that community have. So please, community, use the live chat function on our YouTube channel. If you want to get your questions up for Dr. Noah to ask her about anything COVID related, vaccine related, any of the update mandates or any information that you have COVID related, and I'm sure she'll be open to ask any of those other medical questions that our community folks have, because I know we have a lot of them. But with that being said, we're going to bring up Dr. Noah. Welcome to both sides of the conversation. Great to have you back, and I'm just looking forward for tonight's presentation and a question and answer for the community.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Brother John. It was great to hear all those updates and sad to hear them. And I just want to appreciate you for raising the gun violence issue. That's something that Roots Community Health Center has been working really hard on advancing and understanding that gun violence is a public health crisis. And I know I'm here to talk about a different public health crisis tonight. But I think it's really important that we look at the issue holistically, not just from an enforcement perspective, but really about all the things that lead to violence, all the conditions that have created violence, and all of the trauma and impact that causes. And so just a little bit about Roots. We're founded and headquartered in East Oakland, where we put ourselves there on purpose. Started as a 2-person volunteer operation back in 2008, and now we have multiple sites. We have about 200 full-time employees. Our headquarters is at 73rd and MacArthur in East Oakland, and our main campus is at 99th and East 14th in East Oakland. And then we also have a street medicine clinic that is a mobile clinic that goes out into the encampments all throughout East Oakland and provides care there. I know Dr. Williams has been on the show before. She's our medical director of the street medicine. We also have our youth satellite clinics, which are located inside of the youth shelters, Dreamcatcher Youth Shelter and Covenant House youth shelter, and that is where we provide also primary care and behavioral health care services, navigation services, benefits enrollment, all the things that we provide at all of our locations. We also have services in San Jose as well. We have a location in San Jose, and we have a new community center coming up at 78th and MacArthur. So we're just continuing to grow and expand and really do anything that we can to meet the needs. So in addition to primary care for the whole life spectrum, from newborns all the way up to our elders, we also provide navigation services, which is basically helping navigate through any of the barriers, whether that's legal barriers or housing or food security, all of those things. Navigators is our largest job class at Roots, and they're really key people to have on your side to help you get through all the crazy bureaucracies we have to deal with, and also to overcome any barriers that folks have. We also have 2 workforce enterprises where we provide workforce training. One of those is Clean 360, and that is where we make natural bath and body products and hand sanitizer. And also Hamilton Broadway Signs, where we make commercial signs. And in both of those places, we offer training to folks who've been marginalized from the workforce, and those are apprenticeships that we provide to the community. And then they're able to work in those workforce enterprises, and those are ways that we are able to keep those programs sustained. And with the pandemic, we've also been doing a lot of COVID work. We've done over 40,000 COVID tests. We've done maybe 18,000 COVID vaccines. And I spend a lot of time looking through all of the data and making sure that I'm able to really communicate with the community what it is that we know, what it is that we don't know, what's the information that we need in order to make the best possible decisions that we can in a very imperfect situation. And it has been a frustrating and imperfect situation all along for so many reasons. And so one of the things that we do, in addition to providing just community walk-up testing and community walk-up vaccination, which we've been doing, we were the first walk-up testing site in the East Bay. And we started that in April 2020. It's so hard to believe it's been this long. And we have also walk-up vaccination for the community. And rootsclinic.org is where you can see all the hours and everything like that of walking up, but it's very low barrier. You can just come and get the service. And one of the things that we found through our process is that there's so much confusion and so much information and conflicting information and disinformation and misinformation. And so one of the things that we started back in June of 2020 was the People's Health Briefing. And that is about a 20-minute segment every Tuesday morning at 10, where we go over exactly what is going on right here locally with COVID-19, but also just what's going on in general. I end up, I'm the one that reads the 80-something page documents when the drug companies are trying to get something approved. I'm the one that's listening to 8 and 10-hour meetings that they have to deliberate, and really taking from that and assimilating that with all the research that's ongoing, and really trying to do our very best job of continuing to be an advocate for our community, because so much harm has been done in our community and to our community. And that's the reason why I started Roots in the first place, because we really knew that we had to be that trusted voice and that trusted resource for our community. And it's no different with COVID. In fact, it's just accelerated the need for timely and accurate information. And so I just maybe will do an overview of kind of where I think we are right now in the pandemic. So unfortunately, right now, worldwide cases are going up. And this is, COVID has its own nature and its own cycle. And so we can do interventions that make a difference, but there's also an element of COVID doing what it does. And COVID has really been a step ahead of us, essentially, since it came on the scene. And so that is the reason why we're constantly tracking it and really trying to understand exactly what's happening in the moment. I don't try to predict out more than a couple of weeks. I've learned that that's not something any of us should really do, but we can try. We can look at the models, and we can see where all the signs are pointing, so to speak. So right now, the United States is seeing an uptick of cases, and we are still around 1,000 deaths a day. And that is that's something that I worry that is getting normalized a little bit. And I don't want us to normalize this, because it's not normal. It's actually quite a large trauma. I think a collective worldwide trauma that we're all going through in terms of the amount of just devastation from not only the deaths from COVID, but certainly we know that over 140,000 children have lost their primary caregiver to COVID. But we also know that there's quite a bit of disability and long-term illness that's happening from COVID, and loss of, economics, employment, all of those things. So there's just fallout sort of at every turn. So we all want this to be behind us, and I think that we all want that. And so I think we have to kind of take it day by day and make the best decisions we can in order to help to make that happen and to protect ourselves from falling, victim to this. And so what we're seeing here locally in Alameda County is that we sort of started to level off with cases. So we didn't come down off the summertime surge like we wanted. I wanted to see the cases keep coming down, but then they kind of just leveled off. And then now there's some signs that we might be ticking up just a little bit. So that is not reassuring because, as we start to head into the colder months, we know that, first of all, COVID, like I said, has its cyclical nature, and it will, it usually is worse in the colder weather. And that's what we're seeing across the country and across the world in different locations. We also have seen that we tend to follow what's happening in the UK by a few weeks. And so that doesn't bode well because they're having surges. And so we're just keeping an eye on all of these things and kind of trying to prepare and really do what we can to, I know before we used to say flatten the curve because we wanted to keep the cases down. And now I'm really a lot more focused on, and sorry if this sounds a little morbid, but this is how I've been talking, but we want to flatten the death curve, right? We want to flatten the hospitalization curve. We want to flatten the curve of people getting severely ill with COVID, going to the ICU, getting on a mechanical ventilation, and dying from COVID-19. We know that we're still going to see cases because no vaccine is perfect, and because we always are, we know we're going to have breakthrough cases. But what we're trying to do is to prevent the death and all this devastation. And so with that being said, in Alameda County, we have 87% of the 12 and up population. So I'll talk about 5 to 11 separately, but right now we have 87% of the 12 and up population is vaccinated. But remember that that's an average. And when we start to look at different groups, we see that we have disparities. So with the Latino population, they're more like in the mid 70s, African-American population, more like in the mid 60s. So we are seeing big disparities there. And why this is really concerning is because there was already a death disparity. So in Alameda County, for example, folks of Latino descent, African descent, Pacific Islander descent have been dying at a much higher rate compared to whites. So you could look at averages, but sometimes you got to dig further into the data to really see what's going on. So for African Americans in particular, African Americans have been dying at, in the earlier part of the pandemic, it was like a little less than double the rate of whites. Then it was double. Now it's more than double. And what's going to happen is that it's going to continue to widen because of the vaccination disparity. Because right now the vaccine is really the only real intervention that we're seeing that's making the big impact in terms of preventing hospitalization and death. And there are some treatments that are on the horizon, but I will talk a little bit about why we can't just rely on those only. Right now, although the vaccine is definitely not perfect, no vaccine is perfect, but it is the best tool that we have at this point. We do need to use our other tools as well. We need to be thinking about our indoor spaces. Do we have good ventilation? What is the quality of our mask? We need to be upping the filtration of our mask, particularly if we are unvaccinated and going around others. And we need to do all of those things. But if you've never had COVID-19, and you've never gotten the vaccine, then you don't have any antibodies. And so to SARS-CoV-2. So the concern is that you can do all those things that I mentioned, like the mask and all of that, but you're just really kind of delaying the time until you catch COVID-19. And when you catch COVID-19, as you all know, it's a roll of the dice of how you're going to do. So we have young, healthy people who've died. We've had babies who've died. We've had a number of children who didn't have any underlying conditions who have died. And then we have people who are old and we thought would do terrible and they survived and they did okay. So it is a very frustratingly unpredictable virus. I've never seen anything like it. Most viruses and infectious agents that we know, we can predict what they're going to do. This one will attack your body. It will attack every organ system in the body. It is causing multi-systems inflammatory condition in children where their multiple organs can fail. And that's happening after they have the COVID infection, even if they had a mild COVID infection. So this thing, we still don't know. There's still a lot of things we don't understand about COVID, but there's a lot we do know in terms of what the toll that it is taking. And I don't want to see anybody else die from this. I've had family to die from COVID, and I'm tired of seeing folks in our community get very ill and have a burden of either a chronic illness or lose their life to this, because now that we have a vaccine, for the most part, pretty much all the people now who are losing their life to COVID are not vaccinated, or they're in the group that really was eligible to get an additional dose because of either they're elder or they have an immune compromising condition and so on. And so what we call that is vaccine preventable death. And in a country like the United States, vaccine preventable deaths are really something that we would consider not acceptable. It would be like you step on a nail and go to the emergency room and they try to give you a tetanus shot and you just decide to take your chances and then die of tetanus. Everybody would be like, oh my God, I can't believe you died of tetanus, or they died of tetanus or whatever. So we're getting in, and I get it. The vaccine is new, and so there's a lot of questions, and that is good that we have those questions. But it is becoming in that realm of a vaccine preventable death, and so it's that much more tragic every time it happens. So as we start to head into the winter months, and we are looking at a very likely possibility of a surge, then what we worry about is, will that then, result in a surge in terms of hospitalizations? Will our hospitals get full? We've seen that still happening in some parts of the country, sadly, and that we will lose people. But the majority of people that we will lose are those who are unvaccinated. So that's why a lot of my concern is making sure that people have their questions answered, so that when they're making their decision, they're making it well informed. And so that is why I really want to hear questions. That is the main thing that I want to hear is, do people have questions? And so I could just keep on going on and on, but I think I'm going to pause there and see if we have any questions.
Well, while we give the community, I haven't seen any questions come. I know you were speaking, so a lot of times they'll wait. But I have a lot of questions, about this. And, I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, and I know they have approved, for the younger children 5 and up to get vaccinated. And I haven't made the decision yet to talk with my daughter to get her vaccinated, because I wanted to get a little bit more information. I mean, even when I was vaccinated, I kind of waited a little longer because I wanted to see what the effect was. But for our young folks, because it is new and they were still trying to figure out the stuff from the adults that were getting it, some of the feedback that we've been getting back has not been so great for the young folks. And I want to just kind of hear your perspective on it and see. I was on a call in the San Francisco Department of Public Health, and they were saying that dosage amount of the vaccination was causing some problems with some of the younger folks. And, just wanted to hear your perspective on that. Is it they're still trying to find out that line of how much for those 5-year-olds and up, and things of that nature, because I know they were saying some of the young folks were having some reactions to how much was given, and they was thinking that maybe they need to lower the dosage, or, can you talk to some of that?
Yeah, and you may be talking about the 12, kind of that 12-year-old group. I'm not sure, because the 12 and up are getting the same dose as the adult, and that is the 30 microgram dose. The pediatric dose is a 10 microgram dose, and so it is a much smaller dose. And you're right, it's still new and we're still gathering information. And so I think the decision-making process, to me, has a lot to do with the activities and the behavior and the exposure that people have. And so I'm like you. I didn't rush out when I could have. I was eligible for it right away, right? Being in healthcare, I didn't rush out right away, and I wanted to see. I wanted to see a certain number of doses. I just had my own thing in my mind. I wanted to see, a few million people get it, and it might not be 100% scientific, but I share that anyway, because I think we always want to see, if we can afford to, we want to see what that 1 in a million thing is. But I also was not on the front lines seeing patients all day in and day out. And if I was, I probably would have been in that first group, because I would know that my exposure was there. So I feel the same way about the children. If they're going to school, they are exposed. And I think the decision then becomes, getting the vaccine without, a year of course, we all love a year of data. I love a year of data. If a new drug comes out, I'm one of those doctors. I'm not going to prescribe it to you if I have a good alternative. I want to wait. But that's not the situation we're in. We're in a situation of a literally deadly, highly contagious virus. And if you are exposed, then I think then you need the protection. Now, if your child or grandchild is, let's say, homeschooling, at home doing distance learning, they're still not getting exposed. You're not, there's no that you're not worried about that risk. The parents are vaccinated. The other household members are vaccinated. They're not going around other unvaccinated people. That is one calculation. And you may be able to afford to wait until you see those million. And I mean, I think we are over 1 million already. So we're really already almost getting there. And so, I think we have the time to see that. And I think right now, the 5 to 11, even though, the trial was, a couple thousand kids. So, we're going to get more and more, information as time goes on. There were no safety issues that came out during that trial. Now, as we've seen in the past, it takes a few weeks before we might see a safety signal. And so tomorrow, the CDC's advisory committee is going to be meeting. I'm hoping that this is one of the topics that they're going to be taking up. But there's been no, like we saw with the J&J where they had put the pause on there. It took a few weeks to see that safety signal, but they were able to move on it very quickly. And with kids, the vigilance is very, very high. So if there's anything at all, in fact, anything that is unexpected gets reported. I mean, sometimes it gets reported a couple times. And so there's a lot of information there to be sorting through. And so I think that the calculation about do I do it now or not is the child being exposed now or not? Because I will tell you that age group is becoming the largest share of cases now. And their case rates are going up. And if they're in school, they are by definition being exposed. And it is not benign in children. And I mentioned the multi-inflammatory systems condition called MISC. One of the things about MISC is that 70% of the children who get MISC, and this is where multiple organs fail, 70% of them are Black and brown. And we don't know why. And so these are the kind of things that we don't want to take any chances with. And so I would say if they're still in a bubble, maybe you can afford to wait a little while longer. Otherwise, there really isn't anything right now to lead us to say that we should not be vaccinating them. Do we have as much information as we would love to have? No, we would love to have way more information, but we're in an emergency and it is a crisis and we are losing babies. And for the younger age groups, COVID has actually become one of the top 10 leading causes of death. And that is absolutely terrifying because what goes around, what you hear is like, oh, kids do fine. How did it become the number 6 leading cause of death in such a short period of time? It's not fine. It's really not fine at all. I mean, actually, it's devastating. And we cannot normalize the death of children. And we especially cannot normalize the death of children to a vaccine preventable death, which now we have proven that it is a vaccine preventable death.
So with that being said, we got questions now. They starting to roll in. But Dr. Norton, that's one thing that I appreciate you. And I think this is why the community, when we have folks like you come on and really react and respond because, the transparency, just being honest. And I think, the Black and brown community has been impacted when it comes to like health conditions and disparities. But I think also too, the messaging from the medical and the healthcare system has also helped, push that narrative to where people don't feel trusted, right? Because when the COVID was in the middle of the, rampantness, we didn't have a lot of folks like you coming on saying the transparent, like I would wait or this, right? It was like, no, you got to get it, right? We don't have it. You just got to do it. And it wasn't being really transparent with the messaging and the communication. And I think that's why it's very important to have you, someone from community that really engage with community to have these conversations because I think the community feel trusted. They feel like it's somebody who understands them and being transparent, being honest. I mean, just straight out being honest when I think I've listened to several COVID conversations and it hasn't been so transparent. We had Dr. Malcolm from UCSF come on several weeks ago, and he made some great analogies of what things were like. But those are hit and miss, and I think a lot of times, I think the health systems have done a definite injustice to the Black community during the COVID process and testing. And, one of the things that really frustrated me, I've been on a lot of these calls. There's a lot of COVID pop-ups across the Bay Area that I've been to. And one of the biggest things that I heard from community that was so frustrating when it came to the COVID and the information was, a lot of the information and the preventative stuff that needed to take place in the community wasn't happening because some of the organizations were saying, oh, well, we don't have culturally appropriate people who were, Black or brown to come do the messaging. And it kind of frustrated me because at the end of the day, I was like, when we're talking about a crisis and something that's impacting our community, I don't care what ethnic group you are, right? I just want the information, right? Give me the truth information. I don't care what color you is. If it's truthful information, give it to it. But I think, like you said, because the things were rapid and changing so much, I think it really, it was a period where it really pushed the community left on buying in, trusting on what was going on, because there was so many changes and information. One week they were saying this, and then another week it was, no, we got to change. And I think it wasn't really properly messaged to the community. I think that may have hurt some of the progression. But I think as we had that big shoot up of deaths and people were just dropping, it kind of moved people back. But when we talk about that, like, how do we do a better job, from a medical lens of really, when we're dealing with these issues in our community, to get the folks to just, come in and support. And I understand, I work in a medical facility as well. It was a lot of burnout, doctors, nurses working 12, 15 hours. And, I heard from a number of different health organizations saying, we just can't get the people, the doctors to come on to do it. They're burnt out, we're overstaffed, and I get it. But when you're talking to the Black and brown community, you're trying to get them to buy in, to come get these services or get this vaccination shot. And we've had a history in our communities of wrongdoing and unjust medical treatment and service to the Black and brown community. I just think they did a poor job in the beginning to really do it. And I think now that we're coming out of this a little bit and things are kind of getting a little straightforward, I think with the messaging, having folks like you and different folks to come on to really help, educate the community and again, give them that true information that they need to make these decisions. But I did see across some of the states where the numbers are jumping back up, very, very high fast. And, I just hope tonight, with you being here to ask the community questions, we just help change that narrative. And again, it is a phenomenon in our community, something that medical professionals, researchers are struggling to try to get a hold of. And, this information tonight is very important just for people who are still on the fence of trying to get vaccinated or thinking about their children getting vaccinated and just, dealing with the mandate and navigating to do with day-to-day life now. I mean, some places are not even, we got layoffs happening, people being terminated from their jobs. People can't go into locations and do normal things. So very important stuff. But I think the messaging is something that I would like to see more.
It's been a disaster. You preaching the choir. I mean, that's why I felt compelled to start the briefings. That we had never done anything like that before. We go live, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, like that every Tuesday morning, and just give the rundown because I really do believe that our community has not been considered in the messaging at all. I mean, it's even worse than what it's just. It's I can't tell you how many times I felt like, oh my gosh, here's another setback. It started off very performative. Oh, we're going to show Black people getting the shot. Look, Obama got the shot. Kamala got the shot. And so that was like the first thing, like, okay, we're going to do performances and think that's going to be effective. That's just insulting. And then there was just a number of other things. Even the lotteries themselves raised a lot of suspicion. I could just keep going on and on about how many things where it was like everyone's else like, oh, this is a great idea. And I'm like, no, this is terrible. And so, a lot of my job has been to try to move all that out of the way, because I'm not here to try to convince anybody of anything. I'm here to say, here is the best information that we have. Here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. And we all have to come to our own conclusions. But right now, I really am very concerned because when I look at the low vaccination rates, and some of them are going into our folks that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, You are absolutely, if you have never had COVID and you're not vaccinated, you are really, I hate to say it like this, but really playing Russian roulette with COVID, because you don't know how you're going to do. Even the babies don't. We don't know how the babies are going to do. But when you look at the numbers, we're really worried about those same frontline essential workers in their 40s and 50s primarily, where the vaccination rates are not where we need them to be at all. And they're at risk for themselves and for everyone that they go around. I definitely, every briefing I close out by reminding people to take a multivitamin, to take additional vitamin D supplementation, get a good night's sleep, keep your stress managed. And all of those things are really, really important. But I have to tell you that none of those things are going to give you antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. The only way you get them, this is a novel virus, and the reason why it's killed so many people is because the only way that you get those antibodies is by catching it and taking your chances of living, dying, or being very sick or being intubated, etc., or by getting vaccinated. And right now, the vaccines have, they've really been quite remarkable in terms of the safety. And in terms of the effectiveness, we have to talk about what they were really designed to do. And what they were designed to do is keep you from dying and keep you from going to the hospital. And they've done a great job with that. Now, again, with the messaging, a lot of the messaging was just 98%. Oh, just get the vaccine and take your mask off and be fine. And at that point, I mean, it was when I really was like, look, someone needs to tell the CDC to just be quiet and let us do our work over here on the ground, because, and that's why I think it's really important for all of us to have someone we trust in the community who has the credentials. Aren't everything, but if you don't have the credentials, that's not the person you want to listen to, right? So you need to weed through people who have the expertise and who you can trust, because, and I talked to a colleague who works at the CDC, and he really helped me, because I was really going off about, like, y'all are really making my job hard over here, like with some of your messaging. And what he told me was helpful. He said, the CDC is here to set the floor, and everywhere else can go above and beyond, but we have to set the floor. And even though I don't agree with the floor they set on a number of occasions, and I will be the first to have the critique, right, and to be vocal about the critique, because I think it's important. But it really oftentimes does come up to the local people you can trust, to ask them, do you think it's time to take off our masks? Because clearly it wasn't. That happened after we already knew Delta was on the scene. The CDC lifted the mask mandates, and that, I feel, was a huge setback, in my opinion. And so I think we have to take everything with a grain of salt and use our sense, because I think sometimes we wanted to take our masks off maybe. And so, it plays into our emotions. But I think we have to do what we can to take emotion out of it, because this is scary. This is like horror movie stuff. This whole thing has been scary. It just is scary. And when I finally did go get my, vaccine, I had to take some deep breaths myself. And I'm like, look, you read the studies, the data, the decision that you made. This is the right decision. We are doing this, but I still took a few woosahs before I got my injection. That's normal. But we do have to push through that fear, because the problem of what has happened, and what I think is really the challenge with this botched communication that you spoke of, is that there are people out there who are exploiting our rational fear and our rational mistrust, and they don't mean us well, and they are profiting from it. So they are profiting off of their clickbait, off of their supplements, off of their prescription sales, and a whole number of things that, when you trace back a lot of the disinformation, it is coming from a lot of very nefarious sources that don't mean us well. And so we have to be really critical about what we see. And what I think happens when there's a lot of conflicting stuff and a lot of kind of insulting things that are coming from the powers that be, it creates this vacuum for people. And if you're already scared and you kind of don't want to do it, like if you're like, I really just don't want to do it, and then you get information that says, it's really bad, you shouldn't do it. You click on that. It's a spiral that keeps on occurring, and you keep on getting stalked by these same kind of disinformation, pieces of information that you end up getting sucked into. And we really want to pull people out of there and say, take a step back from that. Find the credible sources that you can trust and ask them, listen to them. The other thing I will just say is that one of the problems is the same reason why Roots was formed in the first place. Each of us has a right to a primary care doctor that we listen to, that we trust, and that we like. And if you don't have one, get one, and keep looking until you find one, because you have a right to that. What you don't want to do is wait till you're sick to try to find that person. Now you don't trust anybody because you didn't know them before. So I really would urge everyone to find yourself a primary care doctor that you resonate with. And if you don't like that one, find you another one. Keep voting with your feet. You have a right to this. And I think if we had those strong relationships with a primary care doctor, some of this wouldn't have been so easy to do in terms of duping people and misinforming them, and sending them down these crazy rabbit holes.
Yeah, I want to just jump in real quick because I got a short-term memory here and I forget stuff. And I really want to just grab that while you said that about the primary care. So some of the assessment and the work when I was in the community, that was one of the biggest things that community folks had an issue with, because when they was going to take the COVID vaccine, the test, right? When they was doing the testing and the nose swabs, you know, people would ask the people that was at the test sites, so how would I know? They would say, we'll get it to you in the text. And they would say, well, if you do come back positive or you do come back this, you have to talk to your primary care physician, right? So on what to do and the steps moving forward. But the people in the community that we was talking about, that the underserved that we were talking about, they didn't have primary care doctors. So a lot of people was like, well, I did the testing, but they tell me go talk about that. I don't have a doctor, right? And then they already nervous. And like you said, now you want me to go talk to the doctor.
Right.
It threw a lot of people off. So it was like, I can't get no information unless I talk to a doctor. So why am I taking a test? So I think that's a great point, that you highlighted about that, because I don't know. That was a big problem that we seen, from the community. And again, that's why your clinic and what Roots do for the community, our unhoused folks and our folks who financially are impacted, is so important in our community, to give those services and meeting people where they at. Because again, before they was doing the text messaging, I remember they couldn't even mail the results to people. You're telling people who are unhoused, hey, we're going to send your results to you. And they like, I don't have a phone. I don't have a location. Like, you get what I'm saying? So it was a lot of challenges. And I hope, as much as the means that we've been in finding out what the pit holes and the struggles were, that we figure this out for the next time. And then politically, in the future, how do we keep these politics out of medical, trust the medical professions, professional folks to really lead these things. And I really want to see more of that in the future. But we got a number of questions they lining up, and I'm sorry, y'all, I've been taken away. People are texting me too. I'm going to get to your questions. We have enough time and we're going to get through it. But the first question we have was, how safe is the shot and the booster shot for pregnant women? I think that's been a big question. People have been worried, especially in the Black and brown community. I don't want to get the shot because I'm pregnant. How does it affect me? So maybe you could speak to a little bit of that tonight, Dr. Norm.
I would love to. And this is a big concern of mine, because I am hearing this a lot. And I'm hearing people saying, I think I'm gonna wait till I have the baby. And that is, we're really, really concerned that could be dangerous and that could be waiting too late. If it's okay, I think what I would like to do is kind of explain how we got here with all of the myths about pregnancy and the vaccine, because I think that there's so much disinformation about this that is really hindering our ability to kind of get the proper message out. But there's reasons for this. So first off is that I think the first thing that happened was when the initial clinical trials with the vaccine happened and the word came out, okay, the vaccine is approved. It wasn't pregnant women should get it or pregnant women shouldn't get it. It was just this kind of, it felt like this very lukewarm, like pregnant women can get it if they want. They shouldn't be denied it. And all of us were like, okay, that didn't sound like a real, strong message. But when I dug deeper into it, there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is that pregnant women were not specifically enrolled in the trial. And that is very common. Most drug trials specifically exclude pregnant women. You could see why, right? Ethically speaking, you're not only enrolling the mom in the trial, but also the unborn baby. And there's a lot of ethical hoops and loops you got to jump through in order to actually do a trial on pregnant women. And this is actually something that we oftentimes find ourselves having to advocate around, because you'll have medication or something else that was never tested in pregnant women, and then they don't get to take advantage of it because we don't know, and we don't know until someone decides to do that study or until much later. And so that was the reason, especially in this emergency situation, why they didn't specifically enroll pregnant women. Now, I say specifically enroll because there were a number of pregnant women in the trial. There were dozens of women who actually got pregnant during the trial. So they were able to analyze those women and find out that they did perfectly fine. There was no difference between them in the control group that got the actual vaccine and the placebo group that didn't get the vaccine. No difference. Birth outcomes were good. Maternal outcomes were good. There was no issues. There was no issues in fertility. Actually, there was a little bit more pregnant women in the vaccine group compared to the non-vaccine group. So there was no fertility issues either. And so after that, what happened is that all of the different societies that look after our moms and babies, like the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine and the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, all these associations started to dive into watching the data as it unfolded. And it was just a very short matter of time. You see the numbers of millions and hundreds of millions and billions of people now. And so we had tens of thousands of women in the very early days of the vaccine being released who were pregnant, who chose to get the vaccine. And now we have hundreds of thousands of women who have chosen to get the vaccine. And all of those societies have went from don't withhold it to recommend it to now strongly recommended. And I'm going to tell you why now what they're saying is it's urgently recommended. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why that is in a second. But so basically, although they were not intentionally enrolled, we were able to still gather enough evidence both during the trial and after the trial to show us that there was no effect on fertility and there was no effect on the baby or the mother's health. Now, the next thing that happened, and I know a lot of folks heard about this because I got an earful about this, was that there was a couple of like scientists in England who tried to stop the vaccine because they said that that the antibodies that you create will attack your placenta because the antibodies are so similar to something called syncytin 1, which is on the placenta, and it's going to attack your placenta, and then you're going to be infertile. And the way that they made it sound, they made it like most misinformation and disinformation. It sounds pretty good. Like it sounded like, oh, these are some scientists who know what they're talking about. They looked at the amino acids and it matched and this and that. So I just want to explain that when you look at any protein, it's a string of amino acids, right? And it's just a repeating sequences. And if you look at any of them, you're going to find parts that look the same no matter what you do, right? And so they actually found out that then by that logic, it should be attacking our collagen that makes up all our skin, our keratin it should be attacking everything, right? It would be like saying we have the same phone number because 3 of the numbers are the same. It's not the same phone number. It's a wholly different phone number. It's just part of the sequence is the same. And so they really got a lot of traction with that. And so there was actually a really good trial that looked at, it was a case-controlled study that basically looked at a group of a couple of hundred pregnant patients. And what they were looking at was early pregnancy, because if something was attacking the placenta, then you would have a pregnancy loss in the first trimester. So they looked at that and they found absolutely nothing. So there was nothing credible in that argument at all. But unfortunately, that was one of the biggest reasons why this myth came out that you're going to become sort of infertile if you take the vaccine. The other thing I'll add is that the antibodies that you make are the antibodies that you make. So if you catch COVID, you also make antibodies. So by that same logic, then you would say that people who catch COVID would also have early pregnancy loss. And so far, we have not seen that either. So basically, no credence to it. There's a journal a journal article in obstetrics that was published, the one I just mentioned, and so you can look that up and see. But basically, that had no credence. The third thing I'll say, I think, is actually significant, at least in my opinion, is that women after they got the vaccine, some have had menstrual irregularities. And the issue with that is that it wasn't one of the listed side effects when we first, when they first did the trial and when we first came out. So imagine if they didn't tell you could get a fever from it, and all of a sudden you got a fever, it'd be like, oh my God, what happened? I'm dying or whatever. So I think it was shocking. And it was surprising to a lot of women to get this irregularity. And then, as we've seen many times, unfortunately, with, again, the medical community, there's a lot of systemic inequities in healthcare. We know this. And I mentioned one about pregnant women, but just women in general. It was kind of dismissed. And so when you looked at some of the articles, it was like, oh, well, we don't have the data. It's like, yeah, but you have all these women saying that this is happening. Like, we need to actually take a look at it. So it took a minute for people to take it seriously. And what I think the bottom line of it is that, we need to look at it so we can quantify it better. And so we can say better, okay, women might expect to see this happen. But I think people started, because they were dismissed and it wasn't taken seriously, people started to make connections that didn't need to be made. You can't go from menstrual irregularity to infertile or to, losing a pregnancy. The fact of the matter is The entire female reproductive system is a responsive system, and it responds to things. And women know this. It responds to stress. You may have your cycle thrown off. It responds to an immune challenge like an infection or like a vaccine. The vaccine provokes a profound immune reaction. So it is very, it is very expected that this could happen, that it would throw off your cycle. And for some women, getting thrown off once means you're thrown off for 2 months, maybe 3 months. So it's a short-term thing. I think every woman is a little bit different, but it is absolutely not of any alarm whatsoever. I think the only thing that we need to learn from this is that we need to take things seriously. We need to kind of like, even if it seems like, oh, it's not a big deal. Yeah, maybe not, but it's absolutely something that we have to take seriously. And now, luckily, there actually are some, like I said, more studies going on so that we can better quantify and prepare people. So all of that being said, I think that's how we got here to people being worried about this in pregnancy. But now let me tell you what we do need to be worried about. Pregnant women who catch COVID-19 are at great risk to themselves and to their babies. They are at increased risk for preeclampsia. So that is a dangerously high blood pressure during pregnancy that can lead to poor pregnancy outcomes and poor maternal outcomes. Also at greater risk for preterm birth, for low birth weight babies, and even for stillbirth. This is if you catch COVID-19. A mom who catches COVID-19 has 3 times the chance of going to the ICU. That is really devastating for a pregnant mom. That's not something we see or ever want to see, is a pregnant mom in the ICU. But they have triple the likelihood of going to the ICU as their non-pregnant counterparts. They are 2 to 3 times more likely to be intubated, tube down the throat, and on mechanical ventilation. 2 to 3 times more likely. That is devastating. And they are 1.5 times more likely to die than their non-pregnant counterparts. And babies who are born to people with COVID-19 are at increased risk of being admitted to the neonatal ICU. So these are devastating potential outcomes. And it's what makes me worried, because I am hearing pregnant moms, and I get it. When we're pregnant, we don't want to put anything extra in our body. We want to be so careful. But this is one of those times where this is the best way to protect you and your baby. Don't wait until after you deliver, because that might be too late. And you are risking the chance of going to the hospital, getting severely ill, or even dying and losing babies. And that is not what we want to see when this is literally vaccine preventable.
Wow, great information. I'm glad you put that out there, community. Great information for the ladies in the community. I'm hoping you all receiving this. I hope you all are taking this information. Maybe this will drive you the other way to get vaccinated. So great information. I see we have a comment. Their 9-year-old was vaccinated last week, and they're happy to report that everything is well. So that's good. We have some young folks that's getting vaccinated, no type of side effects or anything. So that's great news. And to the folks who keep texting me, we're going to get to your question. We're getting down the list. They question me like, why are you shaking your head? Yes, I don't know none of this stuff that he was talking about as far as the women, but I was just listening and agreeing. my both sides of the conversation, folks, is just too much sometimes. But the next question we have up, should I get COVID shot booster if I already had COVID?
This is a great question. And I'm going to just full transparency. I continue to be quite frustrated that we don't have a good test to tell us if we're immune or not. And it might be a little while before we get one. And I've been really watching and waiting for a good test, because if you've already had COVID and you've already had, or if you've already had the vaccine and you want to know, is it time for a booster? Wouldn't it be nice if you could just go get your blood drawn and it could tell you, oh, you need a vaccine. Oh, you don't need a vaccine. We're not there yet. And I wish we were. But because we're not there yet, I think that we have to go with what we do know, and we have to go with what's most reasonable that we do know. And natural infection acquired, I'm not going to call it natural immunity, because there's really no natural immunity. We've got infection acquired immunity and vaccine acquired immunity. Infection acquired immunity and vaccine acquired immunity do look a little bit different. And we're still learning every day. And you've probably seen some headlines that come out that say one is better than the other, or the other is better than the other. And it gets really confusing. And that's because of a few reasons. One is that infection acquired immunity is unpredictable, just like COVID is. So it's not as predictable as the protection you get from the vaccine. The protection you get from the vaccine, we know we started with 40,000 people in the clinical trial. They're continuing to be followed. We've got, hundreds of millions of people continuing to be followed. And so there's a number of studies to go on, and we're seeing that, immunity is starting to sort of taper off after 6 to 9 months. It's also a little bit variable. Some people it's happening sooner, and some people may have never mounted a very good response to the vaccine. And those are the people we worry about the most: people on chemotherapy, people with immunosuppressive conditions or medications. So those are the people that maybe didn't ever mount a great response, and that's why they need 3 doses. So people with those conditions actually need 3 doses. We don't even call it a booster for them. We call it an additional dose or a 3rd dose for them, because they need 3 just to get the first response. So with infection-acquired immunity, particularly people who had mild course of illness, we really are concerned that they're not covered, because we don't have a way to measure it. I wish we did. I hope we will, but we don't right now. And so right now, we don't have enough information. I will say that I think that there are a number of experts in the field, and as I look at data, I wonder, and I think that it's possible that at some point we will determine that people who had COVID maybe a certain number of months ago could get away with 1 dose, but we don't have enough information, and we don't have a way to check if that happened or not. So until we do, unfortunately, I have to say the best, safest thing to do is to go ahead and get the vaccine, the primary series of the vaccine, even though you had COVID. And you should definitely wait until you no longer have symptoms if you just had COVID recently. People who get COVID and the vaccine are like super protected more than anybody. So when we do look at people who had both, they have excellent protection. I'm hoping that soon we're going to have more studies that show COVID plus 1 vaccine versus COVID and 2 vaccines. We're going to need to see all those different permutations. But right now, the vaccine-acquired immunity is just more predictable, and infection-acquired immunity is too unpredictable. It seems to be very much more dependent on the person, much more dependent on how bad the infection was, and much more dependent on how long ago. And so these things make it very uncomfortable for me to say, that you should take any chances. So I don't believe that we should be taking any chances with that. I do believe that the answer for now is to go ahead and get vaccinated. I also am hopeful that on the horizon, I'll be able to say, just go get this test and it'll tell you, but we're just not there yet, unfortunately. And I'll just take this opportunity to say that I am most worried about people who have never had the vaccine and who have never had COVID. You are just delaying the time till you catch COVID. And you're the ones we're worried about when we go into this surge. You're the ones we're worried about losing when we go into this surge. That's not to say that there can't be breakthroughs from vaccine-acquired immunity or naturally acquired or infection-acquired immunity. They definitely can happen. And it does appear, like I said, that the most reliable way to get the protection is through the vaccine.
And while you were just talking about that, I think that was another issue that we had in the community, the positive, false negatives. When people were getting tested, one day they was like, I didn't even go around anybody. I tested negative, and then 3 days later, I haven't even been around nobody, not test positive. So can you speak to that? Why was the testing so confusing, or not really confusing? I shouldn't say confusing, but
it was confusing.
A different type of test, because I remember before it was the nose, and then it was something else that they was doing with the swabbing. What was the test? Because I was always confused. It was like, well, this is a little different up your nose. And the next time I went, they said, oh, you got to put it in your mouth. And I was just like, well, why y'all don't do both of them? I don't know. But that was a question that I had. It always threw me off. I mean, I did get vaccinated, but that was like a frustrating thing, because, working in the hospital, we had to get rapid tested all the time. But it was like, first they started off doing everything up your nose. And then it was like, oh, we got to swab you. And it was like, well, the swab it doesn't really give this. So I don't know if you could clear that up, because I know it might be somebody out there still having that same thought process.
Oh, it's getting more confusing, because I hope I don't add too much to the mix, but I really just want everyone to know these things. Okay. So I think the real question to ask when you're getting a test is it a PCR test or is it an antigen test? Those are the 2 types of tests. The PCR test, you can go way back in the nose. I still consider the gold standard. Sorry. If you really want to know, do I have COVID? Or have I had it recently? it's the PCR test. And PCR is a polymerase chain reaction, which means they basically take that little specimen and they amplify it multiple times. So they're making it reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. So it will tell you if you have COVID now, but it's also going to tell you if you had COVID like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. We've even seen some people be positive for like a month or a little over a month. It's almost too good. It's almost too sensitive, right? So that's the challenge that you have with PCR is it's very sensitive, but it is going to tell you if you had COVID, and it is also going to be the most sensitive if you're in the early days. So that is one of the reasons to your question about why sometimes you were negative today and then 2 days later you're positive even though you didn't go around anybody, because very frustratingly with COVID is you can actually have it for about 4 or 5 days before your test comes out positive. And that is super frustrating. And that is why we usually tell people to wait after exposure, wait about, isolate yourself, wait about 5 days before you get tested so that you don't catch it in that window period before you turn positive. But having said that, the PCR is still considered the gold standard. It's the one that's going to, and that's why they require that one for like school and flying and this and that. But we also have the antigen test, and that is the rapid test. And those are the tests that you can get over the counter. And one of the things we've been advocating for is these need to be free. They need to be free. Some countries have them for free. They have them for $1. I mean, every one of us should have these in our, in our homes. Every one of us should, because it's a tool. It's not a perfect tool, but again, to the messaging, everyone was so afraid that they're going to get misused and abused that they didn't recommend them. And I get it, because I worry that people will take a negative and be like, woohoo, and then go out and do everything when really they need to take additional precautions. But I think every one of us has to take personal responsibility, and that's just the way it is. And there's a way to use the rapid test strategically. So now I've been saying test strategically, which is the rapid test. They're going to tell you they're not going to tell you, like the PCR said, that's going to tell you if you have any SARS-CoV-2 in there, it's going to amplify it and tell you if you had it. So PCR is going to tell you if you have any SARS-CoV-2. The rapid test is going to tell you if you have a lot of SARS-CoV-2. And we need something in the middle, so maybe one day we'll get something. But basically, if you have a lot of it in your nose and you do the rapid test, then it's going to be positive if you have a lot of it. And the good thing about that is that if you have a lot of it, that means you're contagious. And so if you're positive on a rapid test, and so right now, unfortunately, they're about $25 for a 2-pack at the Walgreens or the CVS or whatever. I feel that is a travesty. This is a public health emergency, and we need to have the tools at our disposal. And supposedly, well, I shouldn't say supposedly, that's not wrong. The White House said that they invested $3 billion in rapid tests. I have not seen that hit the street. We do have them at Roots. We have been kind of trying to stockpile them and get them ready. I want every unvaccinated person to please have these, because even though it can't keep you from getting COVID, at least it can keep you maybe from dying. It can keep, because maybe you can get treatment early, or maybe you can keep it from spreading it. But I think all of us should have access to this test because it tells you if you're contagious that day. And we know that it's possible that you can catch COVID and be contagious even if you have the vaccine. It is much less likely, much less likely, like 13 to 20 times less likely, but it's still possible. So, for example, for the holidays, that could be the price of entry, a rapid, because if everybody has a negative rapid test right before they come in the door, I'm talking about just do it right before you come in, do it in the car, do it whatever, you reduce the risk significantly that there will be a positive person there spreading it. You don't eliminate it, because unfortunately, the antigen test does have a false negative problem. So you can be negative and still have COVID, especially in the early part or the late part of your infectious period. And so that's why if you do it that day before you walk into the event, if the next day you have another event, you're going to have to do it again. And if you do it every time before you expose yourself to other people, then you're at least reducing the risk that you have a lot of SARS-CoV-2. And when you have a lot of SARS-CoV-2 is when you are the most contagious. So as you can see from all of what I just said, it is confusing and it's a lot of information. And sometimes it can be hard to sort through. The problem with the PCR oftentimes is that by the time you get the result, it may be late for you to act upon it. You may have already exposed a number of people. So I would say that if you want that definitive test, go ahead and get the PCR. But if you were exposed or you have symptoms, please isolate yourself until you get the result. Go ahead and quarantine until you get the result, because you should just assume you're positive. But you can also add in there the rapid and see what it says. If it says negative, you still need to repeat it. You may need to repeat it in another day or two, and again in another day or two, to make sure we get out of that entire window period that I'm talking about. But these are some of the tools that we should all kind of have a good familiarity with. And I think all of us should know, where's our nearest testing site? And if you can, have a couple of rapids at your home, because if you wake up with that, ooh, my throat, whatever, go on and just get tested before you go head into work or get on the bus and expose a whole bunch of other people. At least you could know if you are, if you have a lot of SARS-CoV-2 that day.
Now, Dr. Noor, you making me nervous now because you're putting people in charge of that. And I don't trust people like that to do it right. But I
Who's
think
in charge now? I
think it's a great start. That we have to do that. But I know we got other questions I'm gonna get to, because you all, when you started talking about it being free for those tests, I don't want to go there because I get riled up about this funding, and I'm really not happy.
Get riled up. Let's get riled up.
No, I don't want to get riled up, because I go there and it's like I'm so frustrated, because during this COVID there was a lot of money, that came to community for COVID vaccination testing and outreach, and I'm still baffled about the amount of money that I spent. And then what you just said here is a perfect reason why I'm frustrated, because it was money there that we could have, even now they could have been purchasing that for community to give away free.
And some were purchased, and Abbott destroyed a lot of antigen tests that were not used. And so it goes back. So it's not only the purchasing of it, it's also the messaging, because everything I just explained, I think that a lot of the people who are kind of over this, the decision makers, they don't trust people. Just like you just said, they don't trust people either. And it's hard, but I think the more tools that we have at our disposal, all we can do is continue to educate and give the best information we can. Will there be someone who takes a negative test and decides to go, act a fool? Of course, there will be. But at least it's something. And at least if they're positive, that they're uninvited from the party.
Yeah, I definitely take that. And definitely, when we talk about the funding and the money, and earlier what you talked about, that lottery thing was a straight joke. I was on some meetings and they was talking about, in the Black community, there was small populations, small pockets of like 4,000 or 5,000 people who are high risk to getting it. And I'm thinking like 50,000 here that they was giving for these lotteries, right? They was giving this money to people that don't live in our communities, don't look nothing like us, right? And I mean, there's millions and millions of dollars. I said, you could have gave all of these folks that are high risk, that y'all kept saying, because when I go to the meetings, all I have here kept saying and say, well, everybody else is great, but the Black and brown community was the highest, susceptible to this, or are passing it. And I'm saying, to get people, they could have been given, 500 for the first shot, 500 for the second shot. I mean, there was an amount of money that they spent on this lottery and some of the other things that they did, that they could really financially impact people, because there was people who wanted to do it, but they didn't know. But I think if you could have said, hey, we give you $1,000 or $1,000 each shot, I think that number would have went up. And I think they wasted a lot of money in areas that they didn't need to do. And I think the governor, that was one of the ways that I didn't think Governor Newsom did a good job on that, with that lottery thing. I think they could have did a better job in the community that was impacted, because some of those areas that they showed where these people won the lottery and they got this money going to was very small populated when it was impacted by COVID. When you look at it by state or county by county, I mean, the largest impacted areas in those counties was the Black communities. And I think they did a terrible job on it. And that was one of the frustrations that I've had.
They clearly didn't ask. They didn't ask the right people.
Right.
Next time they need to come ask somebody.
Right. But I'm gonna move on, because people are emailing me and I gotta get through these questions. But the next one was, do the vaccines protect against the different variants?
Yes, so far so good. And so I think it's important for us to remember that our immune response to the vaccine is very complex. That's why those antibody tests, when I say we don't have a good test, I know we have antibody tests, but that doesn't tell us the whole story. Antibodies is just one small piece of it. We have a whole other, we have B cells, we have T cells, we have memory cells. Memory cells can make more antibodies when they get exposed again, or if and when we get exposed again. The T cells will actually attack and kill cells after they've been infected. So it's like a whole army of different type of cells in our immune system. And so it's not that it has to be the exact same virus that gets presented, but if it mutates enough, it can evade the vaccine. So every time there's a new variant, and that's why the CDC and the World Health Organization is tracking these variants of concern. And the United States is not doing a good job at tracking variants. I can just tell you that much. We're probably sequencing about 3% of specimens across the board in the United States. Where they're doing a good job is in the United Kingdom, and really they keep on finding them first, kind of, before we do. And so, so I feel like we're just over here relying on Israel and UK and everything for all this stuff. And so I do get frustrated, how much we're like, oh, we're a developed country, but there's so many basic public health things that we're still kind of missing the boat on. And sequencing is one of them. But that being said, we have Delta, we have Delta Plus. Delta is so contagious. It's so much more contagious than Alpha. Alpha was the one before Delta. Before that, we had the D614G. Before that, we had the one that came from Wuhan. So this is our fourth mutation. And so far, so good, because the vaccine was made against the D614G mutation, the first mutation that happened. So far, so good. So what they do is when they find that there's a mutation, they test it against the vaccine and against the monoclonal antibody treatment, which is currently the only outpatient treatment that we have for SARS-CoV-2. And so far, because of the diversity of our immune response, all those different cells, it is holding up. Now, is it the same percentage that it was with the first one? It's not quite. We're having a little bit higher failure rate. So probably instead of that, 98 or whatever, which always sounded a little too good to be true. But that was what was found in the trials, was 98% efficacy. But as we get into these other variants, it's looking more like 86, 88%. But then when you get boosted, you're back up in the 90s again. And so I think we're still learning, honestly, about like what the percent actually is going to be. But where we still are very confident and really, truly, I have to say, I'm very impressed by how this vaccine is preventing hospitalization and death. It's not across the board. And we know that. And I think if we had a test to tell us how good our response was, we could actually close that gap. But right now, we're able to do what it was set out to do, even against the variants.
Yeah.
Now, but let me say this, though. I have to say this. If this thing keeps spreading like it is, and especially in other parts of the world, it will continue we will have more variants. Viruses mutate. That's what they do. There's not a virus around that doesn't mutate. That's what they do. So they will keep mutating. And so the risk is, if we don't get to that threshold of immunity to stop the transmission, and this is why we keep saying we want everybody vaccinated. It's partly to protect you so you don't die, but it's also so that we can get to this threshold where it stops transmitting, because every transmission is an opportunity for another mutation. And the nightmare scenario that we don't ever want to see is that it mutates so much that it's no longer susceptible to our vaccines. They evade our vaccines. And in that case, we are going to need a whole new vaccine, which means that, they're going to have to, the good thing is we have mRNA platform. They can put in a new sequence and we will start over again. I don't want that to happen. So let's please just stop the transmission so that we can stop the mutations, because, COVID does not actually mutate that fast. The flu mutates way faster than COVID. The only reason why we see so many mutations in a short period of time is because of the hundreds of millions of billions of transmissions that are happening. So we're giving it opportunity. We're giving it air. We're giving it life. So we need to stop it. And that's what the vaccines do. It cuts it down by about almost 15 to 20 times. That's what we need to do.
I'm scared now. That was the question I was going to ask you, but you answered it for me, because I was going to ask you before we got off tonight. I took the vaccination. If this thing keeps transferring, am I going to have to take another 2 vaccinations or something else? It's driving me nuts now. And this is why this conversation is very important. I see Miss McCoy out there. Hello, how you doing? And I agree with you. I appreciate the transparency from Dr. Nora, and that's why we brought her on here, so that we can really have a true, real community conversation. So again, I appreciate it as well. Thank you for commenting. This is a good question. Does the side effects mean that the vaccine is working, or does no side effects means that it's actually working. That was a question that I had because when I took the vaccination, I had the side effects, the sweat and the chilling and all of that. And I'm like, hey, is it working? And then some people said I didn't have anything and they called COVID. So that's a good question. And maybe you can help us with this one.
It's a great question, and I can't help too much with it. I think we don't know. We don't have a real direct correlation between side effects and effectiveness of the vaccine. We know that the vaccine is effective even in people who don't have any side effects from it. And just because you have side effects doesn't mean that it's necessarily better. So I think it's just really hard to say, but I'll admit when I was getting side effects, I was like, oh, it's working with all my chills and fever because, that is you mounting a response. But just because you don't get those things doesn't mean that you didn't mount the response. And this is, again, why I'm looking forward to a test that can give us more insight into this information. But right now, we do know that people who didn't have any side effects did mount a good response. And men are less likely to have actually side effects. Women are more likely to have side effects. And there's no difference between how well we respond in terms of the effectiveness between men and women. So we can't really draw a straight line between the two, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a great feedback on that because I was like sick for like 5 days. I was down.
Ooh, that's long. Yeah,
but,
most people's too, but yeah, that's long.
But I think with me too is because even when I take the normal flu shot every year, I always get sick. Like whenever I take vaccination, I get sick for a long time, 3 to 4 days, or you know what I mean. So when I started feeling, I was like, oh, it's working because I'm getting sick just because I always take the flu shot. So that's why I thought it was working. Another question is, what's the difference between the immunity you develop from getting COVID and the immunity you get from the COVID vaccine?
Yeah, so I touched on a little bit before. I can give a little bit more detail. I think that it is different. It is a little bit different when you have infection acquired immunity. Your body's exposed to the whole virus as opposed to the spike protein, but really it's the spike protein that's causing all the problems. So we don't really think that's making a huge difference in terms of the immune response that you're having. Also with infection acquired immunity, as I mentioned, it's much less predictable in terms of how much protection you're going to get or how long it will last. And in some people, it seems to last a long time, and in others, it seems to wear off really quickly. So it is much less predictable, I would say, infection acquired immunity. With vaccine acquired immunity, it's more specific to the spike protein and actually to what's called the receptor binding domain of the spike protein. So the part that's really given us grief, it's really specific to that by design. And that could be an advantage because it's more specific. Could that be a disadvantage if we have something that mutates all the way out of control? That will remain to be seen. But right now, the vaccine acquired immunity is more predictable and appears to be longer lasting. But again, I'm going to say this is variable from person to person. And I want to make sure to say that because like I mentioned, you'll see all kinds of headlines that one is better than the other. I think one thing I would be remiss in saying, because there was a lot of headlines that came out of Israel that said, and actually it was a preprint study, it still hasn't been fully approved, but it said something like natural immunity is better than vaccine immunity. And I just want to say that is not an accurate statement. It's a disingenuous statement because we have to remember how many people have died. So their natural immunity was not enough to keep them from dying. So you can't say natural immunity is better because it wasn't better for a lot of people. 750,000 people in the United States did not have sufficient infection acquired immunity to keep them from dying. So it is not better. I think I'm pretty sure that the question was meant to say, if you survived, what's the difference? But I just think it's really important to bear that in mind, that when you talk about if you survive, that's a big if you survived. And so I understand that people who've had COVID want to know how protected they are, and I would want to know too. You can always get an antibody test. It's just not the whole picture, and we can't act upon it really. And so I kind of feel like it's probably not a great idea to go ahead and get it. But at this point, I think it's much more predictable and reliable with the vaccine acquired immunity.
Wow, great information, Dr. Noah. Another question is from Eastone Collective. Shout out to Eastone Collective. How many boosters do you predict we will have to take? Booster shots.
Yeah, this is a hard one. So Okay, so you're just asking me to speculate. So this is like just me speculating, right? Based on what I do know, but we obviously can't predict the future. So it says predict. So I'm gonna get my little crystal ball out here. Here's what I think. I think that the reason why we needed a booster after 6 months is because the primary series was probably too close together. The reason why we had the shots 3 weeks apart and 4 weeks apart was because we were in an emergency. And so we knew that it was going to need to be 2 doses. But remember, I mean, and the funny part about, people saying, oh, the vaccine was made so quickly is that if you remember in the first year of this crisis, and what's taking them so long to make a vaccine? They need to hurry up and make a vaccine. So there was like this, there's like this urgency feeling that I think everyone had around, we just need to get protected as soon as possible. So they went with a minimum dosing interval. They went with 3 weeks, and 3 weeks is really short. If you think about MMR, hepatitis B, a lot of those are like the first one is now, the second one is in a month, and then the third one is in 6 months, or, they're 2 months apart or 3 months apart. So I actually think that the dosing interval between dose 2 and dose 1 and 2 may have been a little short. I don't have any studies to tell you to space them out, so please don't space it out based on what I'm being asked to predict here. So that's all I'm doing is speculating of what I think. There was countries that did the first dose because they wanted more of their country to get the first dose. So they didn't have enough second doses. So people didn't get the second dose at 3 weeks or 4 weeks. That was a decision that was made by their leadership. But the information that's coming back from those countries is suggesting that a longer interval between dose 1 and dose 2, this is only in adults now, that may be giving better protection, and it may be giving longer lasting protection. So if I had to predict, once all the evidence and data is in, that I think the boosters are not going to be every 6 months. I think it's possible that it will become an annual thing like the flu. That is possible. But again, if we slow the transmission rate down, then that may not be needed either. We may be able to actually tamp it down to where, and again, if we get a good test, because like right now with, let's say measles, mumps, rubella, we can check your titers and we could see if you need a booster or not. This is something we do sometimes. Same thing with varicella, with chickenpox. We can check your titers and see, do you need it or not? So I'm hoping that's what's on the horizon for us. So I don't want people to lose hope and feel like I'm just going to have to keep getting a booster every 4 months or every 6 months of my life. Because I think, I hope what's on the horizon is a test that's going to tell us if we need one or not. That may or may not happen, okay? But I do think that there may be some adjustments in the primary series so that, and then that's why we needed this thing in 6 months. So now that we have the booster, so now we have to watch and wait and see what happens to everyone who's been boosted. How long does that immunity last? Because we don't know the answer to that question yet. So I know we're all hopeful that it's like, oh, this time it lasts a year. So we're going to have to wait and see. But I suspect that the reason for the decline after 6 months is because the primary series was spaced a little too close together.
Right. I think you might have covered this question. And the question was, will COVID-19 vaccine provide long-term protection? I think you already said that it probably wouldn't, right? I remember you saying that.
So, this is where we don't know. And even the test about the boost. So the booster, really the knowledge or information about us needing a booster came out of a couple of ways. One was that we just started to see the breakthroughs among elders. So I actually, when you look at what the FDA recommended and even the CDC, they were very strong on 65 and up need the booster. 50 and up with underlying conditions need the booster. This whole part about the 18 and up and everybody over 18 kind of came later. And it's a combination of types of evidence that they were relying on. And one of them was the antibodies going down. But like I've been saying, we can't rely on just the antibodies because there's T cells, there's B cells, there's a whole host of other immune cells that we're not testing when we test antibodies. So we can't just say you don't have any more immunity because your antibodies drop, because you have cellular immunity still. You have the memory. You have that army waiting to make antibodies if you get COVID. So just testing your antibodies when you don't have COVID isn't the end all to all. So for that reason, I think we have to view all of these things with a little bit of, just a little bit of understanding that this isn't perfect science. And part of the reason why the boosters are recommended for everyone is partly a population reason, because we want to make sure that enough of the population is protected so we can get transmission under control. When you're an individual making this choice about, do I need a booster or not? I think, people are on different ends of the spectrum about their risk tolerance, right? If you're 20 years old you're pretty careful, you stay in your bubble, you're not really that exposed. It's been 6 months since your booster. Should you go rush out today and get it? Maybe, maybe not. If you're going to be going to visit grandma over the holidays, then it might be a maybe. So a lot of the decision making, and I know we're skeptical about just leaving too much up to the individual, but I mean, this is what we've got. And so I think it's going to boil down to three things. What is your risk of catching it? So how exposed are you? Are you the person that's kind of, just being a little less cautious and like, I'm vaccinated, I'll take my chances. If so, what is your risk of catching it? So then you might want to get a booster if you're at a high risk of catching it. What is your risk of doing poorly if you catch it, right? So if you have an underlying condition, and remember, underlying conditions includes mental health issues, includes obesity, it includes diabetes, hypertension, all the things. So this includes a large part of the population. So what is your risk of doing poorly if you catch it? If you're concerned that you might do poorly if you catch it, then you might want to consider, let's get that booster. And then third is, what is your chance of giving it to someone who will do poorly if they catch it? You live with grandma, even though she's, vaccinated, she may have waning immunity. Or you go to visit someone who isn't vaccinated, or you have children at home who are not vaccinated because they're 2 or 3. So all those three things I think should factor into our decision making. I think it's a no-brainer if you have an underlying condition, and I think it's a no-brainer if you're 65 and up. Beyond that, I think there is some personal decision making and some timing, right? Because part of it is we're worried about the holidays and people mixing. So you may want to get boosted now before you know that you're going to go visit vulnerable relatives, because you don't want to risk giving it to them. So I think there's some groups where it's very, very clear that this needs to happen. And then there's others where it's like a little bit more of a gray area. And I think when you hear, and I think it's really important, I do want to say this about the conflicting information piece. Sometimes it's not conflicting information. Sometimes it's a different lens, right? If I'm a physician and I'm worried about you as my patient, I'm going to give you very tailored advice about you as my patient. If I'm an epidemiologist, I want to flatten the curve. So I'm going to say everybody, I might say everybody should do this because I want an across the board recommendation. Right? If I work in the ICU, I might be like, look, I'm really just worried about the people that are going to end up here overwhelming my ICU. So sometimes you have to look at the source and their area of expertise and what their lens is to understand where they're coming from with their recommendation. It's not so much that it's conflicting. It's just that we're trying to attack the problem from multiple different angles. And so you're going to hear multiple different perspectives.
And I think that's why it's important that you came tonight to give us that. And I think that's been my biggest, frustration, the messaging. And, and I don't know what is it with this slogan nation. Everybody trying to make slogans, but these are the type of information that we need to have so that when we do hear these different things, you can see from the different lens of the folks to really have, that perspective and really make that decision. I mean, it's the same thing when we talk about defund the police. Like I said, it's great ideals. But again, when you sloganize things and really don't give people the direct impact or the information that they need to understand what's going on, and you give it up to people, it can derail us and hold us back. But great stuff. I think that's great information. We got one more question here. Now, the people that was texting me, rushing me, and they didn't even put the last questions in. I don't get these people. But this is the last question that we're going to take tonight, because I know it's getting late. You've been here, and we appreciate you being patient, coming on the platform, engaging with the community, answering these pertinent questions that sometimes we don't get to ask because we don't have access to a wonderful doctor and an organization like you all. So we appreciate that. But we'll take this last question and a couple of little things, and then we'll start wrapping up tonight's segment.
Yeah, so this is about the mix and match. And so basically I think that the FDA and CDC decided to go ahead and just open it up and say, go on and mix and match if you want, just because I think they were more concerned about access. Maybe some places only have one or the other. They didn't want people to just not get it because theirs was unavailable. And also, I think some of the logistics around checking to see what people got before, then matching it up and this and that. So unfortunately, this was another one that was a little bit frustrating, is that unfortunately, when it came to the booster, so now we're not talking about additional dose. Remember, I mentioned the third dose or the additional dose. If you're immune compromised from medications or conditions, you need a full dose. And you need it a month after your second dose. So you're not waiting 6 months and you're not getting a half dose of Moderna. That's the additional dose. I'm going to set that to the side because that is a yes, get your third dose. Now, for the booster, what is frustrating is that we have head-to-head on full-strength Moderna and full-strength Pfizer. in J&J, but we don't have it on the half dose Moderna versus the full dose of Pfizer yet. So it might be a while before we have the answer to this specific question, which is, if I started with Pfizer, should I stick with Pfizer or should I get Moderna? Because it's true, Moderna has shown better effectiveness, but that was with the primary series, which was the full dose. And now that we're at a half dose, we don't know. And the reason why, I think, I don't want to speak for the manufacturers, but my understanding of why they went down to the half dose is because the Moderna was already a higher dose than the Pfizer. And they wanted to make sure that it wasn't a dose that was going to be causing too much, like too big of a response, too many side effects, or even the myocarditis side effect that we do worry about, or adverse reaction that we do worry about in young men primarily. So unfortunately, we don't have the answer to your question about which one is going to be more effective. Now, in terms of, a recommendation, I think that there are some studies that say just mixing and matching in theory and maybe in practice might, stimulate something a little bit differently, but really the mRNA portion, the sequence portion is really the same between Pfizer and Moderna. It's just a different dosage. So definitely, if you got J&J and it's been 2 months, we definitely recommend that you get an mRNA. But you can get J&J if you're just someone who's like, I don't want, for whatever reason, you just feel very strongly about this. Because some people do. I just don't know why, but some people do feel strongly about J&J. Just go ahead and get the J&J because it's better than not getting anything. But we do recommend you get an mRNA, either or. If you got the Pfizer, we are recommending you stick with the Pfizer. If you got the Moderna, we're recommending you stick with the Moderna. And the only reason is like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They have a little bit different buffers and inactive ingredients. The main ingredient is the same, but the inactive ingredients are a little different. And so if you did not have an unanticipated reaction to one, then I would stick with that one. If you did, though, we had someone who had like a rash on their arm for like a couple of weeks, and it was, and they had to take Benadryl stuff to get rid of that rash on their arms. Not a huge issue. They still wanted to get their booster dose, but they went ahead and just switched brands for that reason, and then they didn't have that problem. So if you had some kind of unanticipated weird reaction, I would maybe consider switching. But if not, I would probably stick with the same one. But I'm saying that in the same breath that I'm saying we actually don't have head-to-head information to say which one is going to be more effective than the other.
Wow, that's great information. Dr. Noel, we appreciate you, coming on, blessing the community tonight with this information. I think it was very, important information. I think your transparency and your honesty of just, where you at, just as a community person as well. I think this is what we need. And I really, believe in these conversations. And, I had a lot of more questions I want to talk about, other things that's happening to our Black and brown community health-wise outside of COVID, that I think COVID is kind of overshadowing some of these other issues in our community when we're talking about some of the other health concerns that are taking out a lot of people in the community. And I think also with the messaging, being a little bit more transparent with the community. I think, when it comes to people, because I know a lot of the big pushback too in the community when I talk to community folks was, well, this person took the COVID vaccination and they died, right? And I think where our mainstream media messed up was a lot of times they didn't go in depth details and say, yeah, this person was vaccinated. They had the vaccination, but they had some really underlying health issues that also attack. When we talk about Colin Powell and you talk about some of the other folks who died that were vaccinated, I don't think they really did a great job of messaging too, to saying, hey, well, they were vaccinated, but because of these health conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes and different asthma, different things that really impact the immune system when they caught COVID, also could have been a high potential of why, they passed away. And I think we just got to do better messaging. I think sometimes, we're just looking for the quick, big pitch and say, oh, this person died of COVID or COVID, but they're not really going into details and saying why some of the symptoms impacted them. And I think if we had a little bit more of that and, having more folks like you come on, I think that would really help our community when it comes to these decision makings. Do we get vaccinated or not? That message is very, very important.
If I could, I just want to interject one thing because we didn't get to it tonight. is that, whether you're vaccinated or not, if you get symptoms of COVID, please get tested right away and avail yourself of treatment. We have a right to treatment. The monoclonal antibody treatment that the last president got when he got COVID, and all the VIPs are getting it, our community still doesn't even know about it. Monoclonal antibody treatment can actually save your life. And so whether you're vaccinated or not, it's very time sensitive. You have to get it within a few days of you contracting COVID-19. So because it's a life-saving intervention, I feel really compelled to tell you, I know that there's potential oral therapies coming on the way. Those will be coming, they're on the horizon. But right now, the only thing we've got outpatient is monoclonal antibody treatment. Otherwise, you're just waiting to get sick enough to go to the hospital. And if you wait till you're sick enough to go to the hospital, it's too late for that treatment. You've passed the window of time. And that's why testing is so important, because you want to know if you have COVID early on so that you can go ahead and get access to that treatment that right now is mostly, wealthy and VIP folks that are getting access to it. And it is absolutely your right to access that treatment.
Wow. Yeah, I wish we had more time, because I did want to talk. I did want to talk to you about the pill, because I did see a lot of that. And I also wanted to ask you, and maybe you can answer real quick. I don't know if it was true. I read it from a news article, and they really may not be the most verified. But I did read an article saying that doing this trial or this testing of the vaccine, that they believe some of the vaccine had helped people with HIV, to cure HIV or something like that. Did you hear anything about that? Because they were saying something that they did some study, and it was like something that the vaccine did. It impacted. They did a study or something about with people with HIV or something. No, yes.
There were people with HIV enrolled in the trial, but I'm not familiar with that. I will look it up. So next time I'm on, I will be ready to answer that question. And the FDA is going to be reviewing the Merck pill for COVID. It's going to be an antiviral. All antivirals have to be taken really soon after you catch the virus. So again, I go back to testing. Find out where your nearest testing site is. Get you some of those, rapid tests, because as soon as you find out you're positive, you have to move. You have to get in action right away. And get yourself access to the treatment. But November 30th, the FDA will be reviewing the Merck drug, and then soon thereafter will be the Pfizer drug. And so those will be the first oral treatments for outpatient treatments for COVID. And so hopefully that will help change the picture and help us prevent some of those deaths. But until then, and even with those pills, those are not going to take the place of the vaccine, because they are not prevention. And they don't work 100% of the time. And there's actually some people where they just don't work at all, and we're not really sure why that is. And so I would just say that, if you still have questions about the vaccine, please get them answered. Like, don't stop until you get the answer. Don't put your head in the sand. Don't gloss it over. Seek out those answers. And we do every Tuesday morning, the People's Health Briefing on Facebook and YouTube, and it's Roots and Powers. And so to get more of this exact type of information, this is basically what I do on there.
Yes, and thank you very much. And I see in the community, we do have to continue to keep having these health conversations, and I would love to work with you to continue to get you back on here to talk about some of these other issues that are impacting our community. We're talking about HIV, STIs, we just talking about high blood pressure. We talk about diabetes. Like, these issues are real in our community. We talk about the food security issues, and that's just so great that we're doing this work with East Oakland Collective, really trying to educate our community, right? And I'm really looking for more of those folks who are, doing nutrition and different things to come really talk to our community and give them some alternatives on like eating habits and things of that nature. And I'm hoping that in 2022, community, these are some of the conversations and our educational Thursdays that we're going to be bringing to this platform, so we really could be intentional in our community to start getting health and really putting health first. And especially when we talk about mental health, and I'm going to continue advocating the money that we put into COVID, that is the type of dollars that we need to put into mental health in our community. We have to get more folks like Roots in different clinics to get these services to our community so that they can have access to it, because it is so important, and we have to just find different avenues to do this work. But we're going to continue to talk about health. We're going to continue to have these difficult conversations here on this platform, because I understand that our community needs it, and I understand the pride and sometimes in our community how we don't want to be in group sessions and we don't want to be in town halls to have these conversations. And that's why it's important to utilize this platform, because somebody in a house tonight who maybe was questioning, do I get vaccinated? Maybe a pregnant mother, at the privacy of your home, you could come back replay this segment, hear Dr. Noor, and that might move you into the right direction. And again, we are not here to push folks one way or the other to get vaccinated or not. We are just here to give you the information that we have, to give you an opportunity to make a personal decision, and hopefully you make the right decision for your family. Because again, I've seen it in the hospital. So many people get contracted with COVID, and then they're looking for a vaccination. They're like, well, we can't give it to you now. You already have it. And we just don't want that to be you. And again, we understand the disparities in our community when it comes to health, and we continue to want to support organizations like Roots, who are doing the groundwork in the community, meeting people where they at, making sure we support these organizations so that those services get to our community. And it's going to take all of us, and we're going to continue to do our part to make sure we get that information out and make sure that we continue to connect Roots with our folks in the community so that they can get the services that's needed to help impact some of these issues that we are facing in healthcare. It is real. It is a crisis. And we don't have time to mess around with these issues. So community, the information is up here. If you want to reach out to the Roots Clinic, you want to reach out to them, we'll put the email up there, and make sure that you all reach out if you have any further questions. Utilize their website, utilize their social media handles, reach out to those folks and get help. And to our unhoused folks, we're going to continue to advocate to find out how we can get pop-ups and more things into the community, ways to communicate and connect with you all so that you feel that you are all getting the service. We have heard a lot of feedback while we're out doing homeless fees and different things, and that's been a big concern, getting consistent support and care. And when they have these issues, getting the prescription drugs and things of that nature to them, it's a struggle sometimes. And we just blessed to have organizations like Roots who are doing it, going out there and making sure this happens. But again, when we talk about the larger community that's impacted, we need these services in our community, and we're going to keep fighting and advocating for these services moving forward as we have been all year and before. Is very important. And again, I appreciate you for coming on, Dr. Noor, because again, it's just something about being authentic. And I see the comments from the folks. It's just something about being real that connects with our folks. And again, it is people like you that come on that really gravitate to our people in the community. And sometimes people just don't understand how important that is, especially in the Black and brown community. When you're talking about building those relationships and trust, sometimes having you, speak is something that it just does something to our community. And we'll check around and see what that impact looks like from community. But when you have people to come here and be real, it's just something with our people. They feel that and they get moved, and they'll move in that direction. So thank you again for giving up your time tonight, being so patient with us. And we're looking forward to many more conversations and maybe things that we could do together in the future, because this is very important. I keep telling people, I know in the mental health realm, they're doing more telemedicine. And, I believe through this communication, through these different digital platforms, COVID was a blessing too, to get us to start utilizing technology to deal with some of this. And like you said, some people don't have a doctor, but just having access to be able to talk to somebody like you is very, very important and very needed in our community. So we really thank you. And we want to really figure out how we could be intentional and strategic of having these type of conversations so that our people can feel safe and comfortable. And that's what we're creating here, that safe space to come and ask that question that maybe nobody want to ask, or maybe I don't want to feel like asking this in a town hall meeting, but they could do it from their homes, and they could put that information in a text chat and get it answered. And I think that's just the way we're going, and we're going to need it as things change. And a lot of hospitals are moving into these hybrid models of having, digital care as well as in-person care. And it's just something that we got to get used to. So a lot of positives and negatives came out of this COVID. But I think as we start transitioning in our communities digitally, we got to have these conversations. We got to have the proper medical folks coming on to really have these briefings and to have this information so that our community can be impacted, especially at these hours, because a lot of times this stuff is happening in the day, and that's some of the big disconnect. And I hear from community all the time, John, these businesses, these nonprofits, they work in 9 to 5, but the real community issues sometimes are after 5 o'clock, And that's a blessing for us to like have this conversation tonight, where maybe somebody wanted to hear it and they off work now and they able to just get this information. So definitely we would love to see those briefings and that information coming to our community, just to give people a heads up and understand what's going on, so that we can eliminate some of the confusion and the mixed messages and these anti-vaxxers that is out here. Today they shut down part of the Golden Gate Bridge. They are anti-vaxxers, all telling people don't do it. And we got to combat that, right? And it's like we haven't had a big push on the positive side. And that's what I would like to see more, because it's a lot of anti-vaxxers talking about this, why not? But we haven't had a real surge from the medical professionals pushing against some of the misinformation that they're putting out. And we're hoping to do that and have these platforms and open it up and give our medical professionals and our folks to come on here to really answer those questions for people in the community that might be on the fence with some of the misinformation that you spoke about today. And very powerful stuff. So thank you again. We appreciate the work you and Roots are doing, and we're just looking forward to connecting and seeing how we can continue to bless our community with this information. So with that being said, community, thank you for joining us tonight for this educational presentation. I hope this information was great. I hope you got some real good pointers and tips out of this. I got some information. I'm ready to let my grandbaby go get vaccinated. I am ready to do it because I want to make sure her health and her safety. We have some other comments in there, some folks who already took their young folks to get vaccinated, no issues. So I'm leaning more towards making sure my grandbaby is protected. So I'll have those conversations with her mom. But with that being said, our next show will be this Sunday at 2:00. Community, this is going to be a firecracker conversation. If you want to check it out, it is going to be happening. This is our relationship part 2 conversation that's going to be happening. It is going to be phenomenal. I guarantee you, it was epic points. Our team is working out right now, getting out some of the highlights and some of the clips from the first conversation. If you haven't seen it, go to our YouTube. We'll put it up on our social media tonight. Check out part 1 so you can kind of see where this conversation is going. The community has asked for this part 2. So there's going to be a lot of people involved. There's going to be a lot of comments coming in like last time. And we got some phenomenal brothers. The ladies asked for a balance show. We have about 4 and 4, 5 and 5. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see you all this Sunday at 2:00. And again, community, as we convene through the weekends and leading up to our Thanksgiving holiday, please make sure that we're safe out there when we're shopping. And if you have it in your heart and you have the ability, think about those unhoused folks who need support this holiday season. Go to a toy drive, no matter where it is. Support an organization, support some folks by getting coats, clothing, and things of that nature, as right now this crisis is impacting our community. And with the loss of jobs and financial support, people need this. And hopefully our community that we know could come together to help some of those folks. Will do that. Thank you all again. Have a blessed evening, and we'll see you all this Sunday for our relationship part 2 conversation. Have a great evening, everyone.